Good evening. You're listening to the Xtreme Movie Show. Tonight's episode, Season 3, Episode 15 of Twin Peaks. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me tonight, I have the young 20-something millennial watching this for the very first time alongside myself, at least Season 3, and Professor Pixel. We've been covering Twin Peaks, like we said here on the Xtreme Movie Show. We do a few TV shows, and we're a media outlet first and foremost, primarily based in the 80s. Now, we have to say, Professor Pixel, watching this episode here tonight, we had commented on how I felt at least some episodes weren't too strong, but they were getting better. This episode, in a nutshell, feels a bit smaller, not as many things happening, but it feels like when you're just crossing things off your list and they just drop off and you're left with a few really important chunks of information for it too. Typically, I always ask you for your initial thoughts and start off, but all I'm going to say is before we get right into it, I'm really interested in what you think about this opening bit because I thought it was very powerful, very emotional, and set up the rest of the episode. What's your take?
Well, to give my thoughts, I do think this is one of the stronger episodes, but I think the best way to talk about it is to go through it. So let's start off with our opening here. The first person we see when this episode starts, after we get past the intro, past the trees and the mountains of Twin Peaks, we see Nadine. And she's walking down the side of the road carrying a golden shovel.
This is pretty good. It makes you go, what the hell's going on? Because it starts out of nothingness, right?
Yeah. And she makes her way down to Ed's gas station. And for half a second there, I thought she was going to hit him over the head with it. But she did not. In fact, she looks at him and says, I want to talk to you, Ed. And she says how she loves him, but she's been a really selfish something or other for all these years and kept him from Norma, the woman that he's been in love with all this time. And she says that she wants him to be free and that she'll be fine. And the shovel has helped her shovel herself out of the shit, as Dr. Jacoby likes to say. And she's so happy thinking that they will be happy. Ed, during this time, the first thing he asked was, what's the shovel? Why'd you walk all the way down here? And at that point, when she said all this, he looks at her and says that he wants her to really think about what she's saying right now because she'll regret it tomorrow. She shakes her head. She said, no, I had the whole way that I walked here to turn back to, just go back on that. But no, she went there. She had to tell him. And at that moment, she just tells him to go. And she starts getting teary-eyed before giving him a hug and walking away. And at that moment, Ed just looks almost relieved. And there, I'll take a moment. And yes, you're right. That is a strong start, especially considering that most of this season of Twin Peaks hasn't taken place in Twin Peaks, that we're actually getting some focus on the characters that we really care about, especially these two. It is nice.
I think that starting off in Twin Peaks, obviously that's been a little bit different of a switch up that we've had in most of these episodes. So I think that immediately makes us go, uh-oh, because to the point that we, I think, basically disagree on is that I like the fact that it's really not in Twin Peaks with all the characters, a less is more approach, whereas the familiarity of it is something I think you're looking forward to expanding. So I think either approach can be satisfactory here, but it's a situation where we get the drone shots early on, help set it up, and even though we know Ed's really been with her for a long time, and as we'll see later on in this episode, other things happen. He has been, the argument can be made that he's been a saint to her because he's been beside her despite the fact that there's a rebound relationship and he was loyal. for some people that may count for a lot. And being married, living with somebody is obviously not the same thing as having a crush, which he literally has with his old high school flame, which we'll talk more about later. And when he says to her, I thought it was very touching. He says, Nadine, tomorrow you're going to wake up and realize you said a bunch of silly stuff, and I want you to just think long and hard about it. And he's not saying it from a place of malice. He's saying it from a place of wisdom because of how long he's been with her and knows her. And despite, for lack of a better term, him putting up with her, I still think there's love there, and they do have that for each other. Maybe she had it more for him. And he's kind of struggled with it too, but it's not like she's seemed unhappy in their relationship. And despite the goofiness of season 2 that we've talked about, her with getting strong and messing around with Mike and all that, it's, again, like I've said, one of the things they've done in season 3 here is they totally flip things. We thought of her as kind of a level B or C character, kind of a comedy relief. And then here, even with Dr. Jacoby, it feels very strong here. The relationship has never felt more strong than this scene here, because when she goes to walk off, he's sad, he's hurt, and but at the same time, I think he's right about what he's saying. So very powerful emotional opening scene, something we are not used to seeing. Normally we're used to seeing like a piece of art or something goofy or a lot of different things, and that sets the tone. But here I was really struck by what they did, and I think it's a smart choice because, like I say, a lot of things don't necessarily happen in this episode, but it feels like crossing some things off your list. They've been on the screen so little here in season 3, but it's been wonderful, and it really makes me go, yeah, I want to see what happens with them, because you're right, it's characters, even if we don't like them, at least we know them and understand them a little bit, and they have some growth. Which kind of brings us to the next scene here, where you're at the cafe, and some song is playing, and he walks in because he feels released, I guess, but he looks shell-shocked to me. And so he goes up, and he's talking to Norma, and he's like, hey, everything has changed. I just talked with her. She's given me my freedom. And of course, Norma's love interest / business partner, which I thought she'd be a bit smarter, especially in her advanced age with all these restaurants. It just seems like a side plot just slapped together, which I didn't really care about. But what the great scene is when Ed sits down and Shelley's like, what do you want? He's like, I'll have coffee and a cyanide tablet. She's watching what's going on. It's shot so well with the song playing. It's emphasizing the mood. And she basically is telling her business partner, aka lover, that I'm going to extra some of the options. Have you buy me out? I'm just going to keep this one because that's what I want. I'm happy with it. It's family stuff. And she does it in such a non-threatening manner. She's like a cooler almost. She defuses the situation here, and Ed is so nervous because here he is finally, after 30 years, whatever it is, opening his heart up in there. He thinks he's going to be with the what might be the love of his life, which is interesting because if there were ever season 4, even though she's passed, I would love to have seen how this would have unplayed, because again, he hasn't been with her. It's not the same thing as being with somebody, and I think that dynamic they've handled very well here in Twin Peaks. So the guy gets a little pissy about it in a very professional way. He's shocked. He's a very arrogant asshole, in my opinion, and he leaves. And Ed's sitting there, and his eyes are closed. She walks up, just puts her hand on his shoulder, and you're like, oh, Jesus, where is this going? It's good stuff, man. Really good stuff. So it's really almost like one long scene that you did the first half of, but I liked it. And of course, Shelley recognizes, true love, and she's just going crazy watching them kiss. It's a nice, tender moment, believe it or not.
Yep. And, well, you can say that Ed's just been loving her too long to give her up.
Right, he went there.
But from there, we go into actually one of my favorite scenes of the episode as we move past the mountains and the clouds and light kind of fades away. We are in the darkness going along the power lines as we hear scratching before we are moving down a road. And it's a familiar kind of shot because there's Doppeldale driving a car down a dark road and stopping near a certain gas station. And there is a bearded man covered head to toe in this just black kind of soot. And he leads him up the side steps, the fire escape, kind of, sort of, of the gas station, and they just buzz out of existence before we move with them. As we're going through the woods, it shifts into, to me, a familiar door frame because it looks just like the one that Laura Palmer, a picture that Laura Palmer used to have in her room, where there's another black figure sitting there waiting, and Doppeldael says to another man that's covered head to toe in black sitting on a chair that he's looking for Philip Jeffries. The guy switches a knob, and it almost looks like a warped clown face buzzes in and out. That's the best way I can describe it. I can't remember if there's any other details of that. It sounds familiar from the movie, at least. But eventually that stops, and in the darkness, there's another larger man, again, head to toe in black, that leads him down into the darkness of the next room. And they're just walking around, and it's complete black all around until you can see in the distance another room appear. And they walk up a set of stairs like they're inside of a house. And as they go up, open the door, and there's Doppeldael ready, it leads him into what looks to be this motel, like this crappy motel. And he moves to room 8. He jiggles the handle, but he can't open it. Then this woman in a sleeping gown and a robe approaches, and she speaks that backwards sort of red room language as she says, "I'll unlock the door for you." She does, and he heads inside to this room, and there's this dimly lit lamp and this overhead light that keeps flickering, and he stares at this one wall, and eventually it sort of fades to reveal one of those weird bell machines that we saw earlier in the season. And it has this one spout where steam is coming out, and we hear, "Oh, it's you." And it seems that that's supposed to be Philip Jeffries. And we hear Doppeldael ask, "Did you call me 5 days ago?" And Jeffrey says, "I don't have your number." And he brings up 1989 when he appeared and said that he met Judy. And it flashes between the moment from the movie where we see David Bowie standing there. And at that moment, Jeffrey says, "So, you are Cooper." And Doppeldael is asked why he doesn't just ask Judy himself. And numbers start appearing out of the steam. I guess to call Judy. But that's when Philip Jeffries tells Doppeldael, "You already know her." And Doppeldael at that moment, he's just staring and saying, "Who's Judy? Tell me who Judy is." And that's when the phone starts to ring. The wall comes back in full force, making the other back room and that bell thing disappear. And Doppeldael just takes the phone, picks it up, and we can hear the scratching, and he flickers out of that room until he's at a phone booth right outside of the gas station. And it's hung up, so he puts it back, and then who comes out but Ben's grandson with a gun. And he starts talking about how Audrey Horne is his mother, and he's getting ready to shoot, but Doppeldael just steps up, beats the gun out of his hand, Richard, I believe his name is, and tells him to get in his truck. He quickly sends a text saying Las Vegas, and yes, it is a question, and before getting in, driving away. And Just as they're gone, we can hear the scratch as smoke is emerging from the gas station and light flashes from within before it fades from existence. Ooh.
If I didn't know better, you're practicing your dramatic readings because, I can just see the page of notes in front of you. All I gotta say is this a pretty dark scene here too. But let's go back to the very start of this here down the road. Did you recognize the significance of this convenience store?
Yes. Yes.
And that
It's the
would
one from
be,
episode 8 where we see all the men covered in black just running in and out of, and the explosion from it.
yeah.
Um,
And what really came to mind was us talking about season 1 with Bob and Mike, because that's where they met, was above a convenience store. And so when they walked up the outside of the convenience store there in here in this scene or whatever, and then they get materialized into this red roomish kind of area and all that too, I went, oh, this is the place where Bob and Mike must have met. But I believe it's also the exact same room in Fire Walk with Me where we saw, remember Mrs. Tremond and the young kid and the Garmin Boza, the corn stuff that we're like, what the hell's he got the corn for? Because that's the essence of is required to physically produce what do we call it, a tulpa, which we've been calling a doppelganger. So for me, this scene was more, even though it's a very slow building scene and it looks great, it was all of a sudden a quick aha, because it really sliced a lot of stuff together from the movie, from season 1, just to some lingering things where we know, okay, an essence can kind of come out. If you mix it with the right stuff, you can get a bad dude out of it. So I'm going, okay, well, how many more bad dudes are there besides Doppeldale? And I suspect there's going to be more than what we think, just because of how much we're starting to see it now. But I did like the scene. It makes us feel like, okay, we haven't seen Doppeldale too much, but he's definitely going to be getting closer to Twin Peaks, and I like it. And so, of course, this convenience store seems to materialize and dematerialize and come into different places, and I don't know too much about that. That's a little fantasy-ish to me, but it is what it is. But the guy that had followed him is Ray. This guy's a son of a bitch. And yeah, he gets kind of pulled in literally to this situation where they're driving off, but we'll talk more about Ray and other characters later because it's pretty good. But yeah, it kind of went pretty long, but it was very convenient because I'm sorry, it's not Ray. It is Richard Horn. That's
Yeah.
my mistake there. Yeah, I'm
Ray's the
getting
guy he
confused with the
killed.
other guy. Yeah, exactly. So
The
next
one
scene,
thing
eh?
that I am going to say, because that it just occurred to me, this place that we always see, it's always dark, kind of lacking in color, kind of matching the men that run around it, this grayish black. And it occurred to me last night that for the first time that maybe this could be the Black Lodge, considering that, well, Bob won the fight with Cooper at the end of season 2, that this itself could be the Black Lodge coming in and showing its presence, as it were. I'm not sure of that, but
Well, we only saw these guys, whatever they're called, when the atomic bomb testing went off that we saw with the girl on the fake army base, like 45 or whatever it was a few episodes back, very artsy episode. So I don't know if these guys are like the keepers of something there too. Yeah, we'll see what significance they may or may not have. If they do, I don't think they're meant to be. But this guy who's walking through the woods in this next scene, it's a totally, it's more during the day. This guy, I think, was the reporter that reported that we would see on TV, like before we cut to Invitation to Love and talk about, body was found today on the railroad tracks, believed to be Laurel Palmer, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of neat that they pulled him in, because at first I was like, who is this guy? But he's got his dog, and he sees a couple that we really don't remember too well. But I remember, oh, wait a minute. The girl in here, this guy is the guy that's the really bad drug guy that was married to the blonde that you remember her name, that's been in some stuff that we haven't seen, Shelley and Bobby's daughter.
Seafried.
Yes. So, but he's fooling around on her with this chick who I had told you was the piano playing genius way back in season 2, one of those episodes. So they have her being a bit role. I don't know if it's the same actress or not, but it's supposed to be the same character, and she was like the super genius of that. But I kind of was like, what's going on here? Because I thought, did I forget something? Have they strung it out too long? I didn't remember. Because it's been a while. We only do this once a week. But Steve's got a gun with him. But apparently he's looking to whack himself. Self-harm, as we would say for the censors out there. And she's trying to like talk him out of it. But this reporter guy sees them, and he obviously acknowledges rather quickly what's going on and chooses to leave. Nothing happens to him is good, but she freaks out. She goes to a different like tree or whatever like that, but she gets a gunshot. And then we don't see what happens, but we see the reporter guy going. Apparently they're close to the Fat Trout trailer park. He goes there and they talk to Carl, kind of about what's going on. And then what I liked about the scene, the way it ended, is the scene goes from him telling Carl with Carl just listening. From that to kind of glides over to where we had heard them arguing early before on the trailer that they were in too. So it reminds you, yes, if you don't remember these people, these are ones having a really horrible argument the last time we saw it. So it's a nice way to kind of reference some minor level characters to kind of jog our memory a little bit about it too. Because something I think was thrown out of the window last time, or you heard a crash or whatever. Yeah, I'll stop here and let you catch up because normally we do 2 scenes and kind of overlap. But let me go ahead and have you fill in here what you want to say.
Yeah. Well, the thing is here, seeing Shelley's daughter's husband, as it were, but it's a little worrisome when you have to go into the 3rd position of a title. But this guy has been scum. I'm not gonna.
It's trash.
I'm not going to. Yeah, no, he is trash, and I have no reason to believe this is anything to do with the mystical side. Probably is, but I have no reason to believe it. They haven't shown anything. So this guy wanting to off himself, well, that's his decision, I guess. But at least Shelley's daughter doesn't have to deal with that anymore. But it was nice seeing Carl.
Is coming from Canada is a hell of a drug, is all I'm going to say. But for him, I think it's just meth.
But we're getting to see Carl again, hear about this. It was, well, it was nice seeing him at least. But from there, we get a few quick scenes. We go to the Roadhouse. The announcer announces that they are playing Sharp Dressed Man by ZZ Top. And I just noticed there's a pine cone at the bottom of the microphone. Just a little thing. We see girls. They're with their guys. And James, for some reason, has decided to stop by and says hi to a woman named Renee. And that's when this guy named Chuck he gets up. You're talking to my wife? And starts beating on him. But that's when James's buddy with the green hand comes in and punches. The song kind of statics out as he punches the guy, but then he takes another one. Again, it kind of glitches out, but comes back before we see Renee's husband on the ground, and he's like foaming at the mouth. Oh, and we get to see, James at that moment. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for that to happen. He's acting almost a little special there. But I don't really get if we're supposed to feel anything here, because it's just kind of an information of, well, this is what James is doing at this moment.
Let me ask you this. Did you get the feeling that James, the way he delivered the lines, this is the lady that was crying when he did the Just You song? Renee, I think's her name. Beautiful woman and all that, but married, of course. So obviously he tells his buddy, hey, let's go to the Roadhouse. I like her. And then he says that to the husband. Well, I just like her. I just wanted to say hello. Did you get the feeling that James was mentally challenged, to use a PC term here? He seemed like his delivery seemed slow. He didn't seem like cool, sexy James or the teenagerish one that was slaying all these women that we saw in season one. He seemed not right mentally, or maybe that's my take. How did you feel about that?
No, I think that's exactly what it was at that
Because we
moment.
don't know
Uh,
what's happened with him. I thought it was funny.
yeah,
His
no,
friend was in there with the superhero glove kind of thing, but it was a great line where at the end, and this is what made it interesting, where he goes, "Oh, I'm really sorry, Renee. I didn't really mean for that to happen. I don't want anybody to get hurt." You kind of believe him, and you would expect her to say something mean or whatever, because even if she's not crazy about her husband, it's still her husband, and this is just a dude that sang a song, so it's not quite the same. But she looks like she just cannot, for the life of her, be mad at him. Not that she's smiling, but she's looking at her husband and he's foaming at the mouth. He's on the ground. He's like, you got to call 911. He's telling people. And the line that's great was he says, yeah, his eyes just don't look right. I'm like, that's pretty cool. And I get it because this glove thing is kind of absurd, but now it's like, holy crap, that this is some serious violence. And it's not like a big fist fight. The guy's hand hardly, it was like a 1-inch Bruce Lee punch.
yeah, no. And from there, we get a couple other scenes that I'm going to go over real quickly before
Sure.
I pass it back to you. First, to the FBI office in Vegas. And apparently, the guy tells the director that Dougie and his wife are here, and they're fine. But the kids don't seem too happy. And the guy asks, kids? And he goes over, and it's not Dougie Jones and his wife. It's another Dougie Jones. Another quick scene. We get to see Mr. Todd. He calls Roger in and asks if they heard anything from Anthony, and they haven't. And he's about to tell him something, but that's when, bang, we get to see him shot, and then Mr. Todd is shot, and there's Chantal, yes. And she's on the phone as she's doing this. And she's like, oh, crap, because she has to go back in and shoot Roger one more time because the shot wasn't deadly enough. And then she tells her hubby that she wants fries.
With extra ketchup. Sorry.
No. I mean, it's a quick moment, but it's there.
Well, for me, at the next quick scene here too, this is where I thought the pacing kind of changed because we've only had a few scenes, but it's almost over. We get a cut of the Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department, and this is where James and I forget the guy's name is Buddy, the green glove guy. They're getting locked up. I had already forgotten about the eyeless woman who, in my own way, I feel like she's been trying to do communication nonstop and whatever supernatural language it is. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is the lady we saw in that weird dimension structure, philosophical place of hell, whatever that Cooper was in way back when. I was like, oh yeah, I'm glad they just put her in there for 5 seconds, let her just so I'll remember that she's there, and it's important because it's in Twin Peaks. I'm going, okay, that's right. Now we're going to do it. And then we get a quick edit, I think, just to remind us about Chantal and her hubby, because they're eating in the van. Because, like I say, they're eating in every scene they're in every episode they show up in. Speaking of eating, the next scene that was kind of goofy, and to me, I thought this was the most interesting look because I go, okay, I feel like something's changing because Jane Ease gives Dougie Dale. Excuse me, good Dougie, a piece of cake, and she's just, oh, everything's been so great. I can't believe, how wonderful things are since blah, 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 and all that. She kind of walks off, and he's eating a piece of cake, and he's just kind of thumbing a remote that's right there in front of the TV remote. And apparently, and I did not know this, Once he hits the power button, a TV comes on. They're playing this old movie, and they say, "Get Gordon Cole," because apparently that's the name of a character in the movie. Well, that's where obviously Gordon Cole must have gotten his name from. And it kind of freaks him out, like it stirs something deep within him. Um, but he kind of senses this electrical hum, the 60 hertz for the American electrical engineers that care about that sort of thing, and our European friends listening to the Extreme Movie Show here. That's 120, I think, for you guys. He does what, babies are not supposed to do. He kind of walks over and starts fiddling around with the outlet and sticks a fork in it. And then there seems to be like this blackout or whatever. And she screams and their kid screams, and that's it. I'll pause there because the end's literally right after this scene.
Yeah, when we get to see Dougie see that moment and he says, "Get Gordon Cole," he pauses it. And his motion is absolutely fluid. There's no pause, nothing slow. He stares for a long moment. And it's almost like he's about to wake up before there's scratching at the electrical socket. So he crawls over and tries to figure out how to stick the fork in it. But I'm hoping that maybe, just maybe, this shock is what he needs to wake the hell up.
Exactly.
But from there, we get to it is an emotional scene. It's the log lady. She calls Hawk, and she says that she's dying. Says that he knows about death, and that it's a change, not an end. When the wind is blowing, and she says that it's time. And there's some fear in letting go. She tells him to remember what she told him. Can't say it over the phone, but he knows it's what she said whenever they last saw each other in person. And at that moment, she doesn't say her log says it, but it feels kind of like that. She says to watch out for that one, the one under the moon on Blue Pine Mountain. At that moment, she says her log is turning gold and that the wind is moaning. And one last time, she says she's dying before she says goodnight. And with that last goodbye, we actually do look at that moon. And before we move to Frank, who's there at his laptop, there's a picture of a fish on it, just a little thing. But everyone comes in, everyone important anyway. So you see Bobby and Andy and Lucy before Hawk comes in, because he apparently called them all there and says that she passed away. With one final shot over the woods, we move once more to the log lady's house as the lights that were on inside fade to black from within.
Yeah, it's the episode is ending pretty much how it started, with a very serious emotional scene here too, and I think it's a good one. Legitimately, the actress passed away like a few days after filming all her scenes, and I think she probably knew it. So there's something supernatural, I think, in a sense, a bit about here, because you know that the whole time, and give her credit for doing it, especially in that state when you know that you probably don't have much time left. And I don't know the specifics of the diagnosis and all that stuff, so I'm not going to speculate. But you used to give me a little bit of grief about her, saying she's my lady on this and that. I always thought she was an interesting character, and I think unfortunately, unless you're watching, I think the original DVD run where they would do some voiceover stuff at the beginning with some stories, or you've read the secret history of Twin Peaks, and the dossier of blah 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 and all the stuff, which I have not. My understanding is there's a very definitive storyline with her and why she's attracted to the owls and woods and what they mean, and all this stuff, like with Hawk, that we only got a taste of, mostly in season 1, even maybe a tiny bit with Major Briggs in season 2, and really not hardly much at all here. It makes sense. We get the sense that Hawk and Margaret have a strong understanding of whatever it is that they're discussing here, and it's touching the way Honk respects what's happening and lets everybody know it. And I think, as much as we shit on Andy and Lucy and everybody, Lucy sheds a tear, whatever, and Andy, we just see his hands go over her shoulders because she's real petite, comforting her and all that. It just, again, it's not her dying that we need to have, but it makes sense. And just seeing their reaction to it is what really tells us what we need to know. And again, starting off in Twin Peaks, the last scene really is a nothing scene. It's almost as bad as what you say with just people at the end talking. Audrey and her husband, Charlie, the vertically challenged individual, again, it was a bit of a shock the first time we met them. And then this almost confirms it to me that I think something's dreadfully wrong with her, because he handles everything in such a composed manner, Charlie does with her, about stuff. He's not yelling at her, he's not talking down to her, but he's short and he's to the point, and he's dealing with a lot of nonsense because she just cannot, for whatever reason, make up her damn mind about getting her stupid jacket and getting out the friggin' door. And he's had it. And we get the expressed vibe here before that this has happened a zillion times, and that for whatever reason she's unaware of it. So she's mentally compromised in some way, whether she's hysterical because of the death of somebody and in denial, or literally heavily medicated, unable to recall certain events. I'm speculating totally here, but her acting is superb. And I got to give this guy, Charlie, he's smaller than she is, but not quite what you would. I don't think he's under 5 feet, so he's not going to go by any particular labels that some people might go by. If you're 6 foot tall, he'd look a lot more powerful and competent. And I think the whole thing to shock us here is by making him a little bit smaller, because it's going to take more out of his performance to see what the hell is really going on here. Because that's the thing with it. He's basically tells her, hey, all right, I'm going to take my jacket off since we're not going or whatever. And he goes to sit down on the couch, and she freaks out, gets on top of him and attacks him. She's like, do you know how much I fucking hate you? I can't stand you, whatever. It's a good scene. It's now I don't know what's going to happen of it, because it seems like it's almost been the same scene 3 times in a row now. I thought it was very effective, no matter how short it was. What's your take?
I agree that there's something wrong with her. I'm so tired of him, though, as it were. So when she's just attacking him on the couch, you're right. He is appearing to be reasonable, but she's like all sorts of frazzled. There's something dreadfully wrong. But this scene again, it's missing to me so much, because we have no idea. We aren't clued in onto anything other than the fact that this is her husband, and she actually likes spending time with Billy more. But there's actually one more scene before the very end, because we go to the Roadhouse, and while, yes, music's playing, that's not the main focus. There's a girl in glasses sitting alone at a table. 2 guys approach. She says that she's waiting for somebody. And that's when they look at her and then just pick her up and sit her on the ground before they take the booth. I don't mean to laugh. The waiting girl slowly gets on her hands and knees and seems to start crying as she's crawling through the legs of the people on the dance floor for some reason, until she gets surrounded by people and she starts screaming as the light flashes around her. It fades to black, and the credits we actually get to see is that motel that Doppeldale was at earlier. And there's one last shift in the credits that we get to see the lady standing in the distance. It's very eerie, but you know what? I prefer that to just the music at the Roadhouse. So there we go.
Not gonna lie, I once those credits started rolling, I ended, so I didn't even see the scene at the end that you're talking about, because out of all the songs that were played and all the artists that we've seen, no matter how independent they are or big, whatnot, this one was just, it didn't work for me, and I'm being kind here. I'm gonna leave it at that. This scene made no sense, but I think as of now, because we've seen it in all the episodes at the end where they're just playing music and talking and stuff, it's like, Um, I think they're just trying to downplay it because, again, we see Laura's picture in the clouds when we get the beautiful opening here too, and we even get to hear the rush of the river there by the Great Northern Hotel. So we get Laura at the beginning, not at the end, right? So now what are we getting here at the end? We're getting the other people of Twin Peaks and whatever issues they're having. And I think that's probably the whole point to it, that, okay, here's a guy, James, that we know. What's he involved in? Well, what's he normally involved in? Shagging women. And one that he, probably we're going to get him in trouble. And in this case here, it's classic, situation. So no, I did not see the scene here at the end because I will, and it's my excuse is that I've been conditioned to just go, yep, time to turn it off. Because as soon as this thing start rolling, I don't give a rat's ass. So there you go. The scene where they move the two biker dudes move I think she looks Asian. I'm just gonna say, I don't know if she is. The Asian woman that I don't know that we've met before out and crawling. I'm like, I don't get it. Don't really care. So I'm not hating on it, but honestly, it was the weakest part of the whole episode to me. That being said, I thought this was a very strong episode. It seemed like it was a couple really big scenes rather than a bunch of loose stuff. Addition by subtraction is what I was saying earlier with my analogy. Liked the episode a lot. I'm curious to see what's going forward. I think we have 3 more. It's pretty darn good, and yet there's no big speeches, there's no big revelations, there's no more new characters except for this girl here at the end that I don't care about. Good episode. The one person that I'm thinking about, though, and I'll close on this and hand it to you, is that the asshole that ran over the kid. Not even Chad, who we hate because we saw him in jail there, right? Brief, just remind us that the jerk off Chad's there. Dumbledale's got his fingers, it seems like, everywhere, all the way, of course, into Twin Peaks, right? And I just don't recall the kid that, or the not the kid, but the guy that hit the kid who died, because he was friends with the one dude. I think he was going to off himself, or the other dude, or whatever. He's a bad dude. I just keep going, well, we've only got 3 episodes left. He's the one real loose end that I'm going, okay, what do I really want to know about that I hope gets answered is him, but I don't know if we're going to get everything answered. It's him, and that I don't know, and I'm really, really curious about Laura Palmer's mom, just because she was really strong in some episodes too. So that's where I'm at after this episode. What's your take on this for your final thoughts?
Yeah, no, what I think about is actually towards the middle here. The scene that went on a little longer was Doppeldale at that gas station. And when Philip Jeffries was talking to him and saying, "You are Cooper," that gets your let's get the tinfoil hat time, because when he says "you are Cooper," I don't think he's talking just purely about, oh, you are the evil doppelganger of Dale Cooper. No. I think from where we stand right now, this is a part of Cooper, and maybe Dougie Dale is the good in him, dumbed down, obviously, but the good in him there as well. And I think the culmination might be these two conjoining, as it were, to bring back the full Cooper. But that's all I'm really thinking about at this moment, and I'm hoping that I'm right, or because otherwise I just wasted the time. Overall, a good episode. I'm looking forward to the next one. Only 3 more remaining, and then we are done with Twin Peaks. So let's hope it's a strong finish.
Yeah, and it feels like it's leading up for a climax there too. And it's been 5 years since the show showed on Showtime. So I know there's been talk about a potential season 4 called Wisteria that a lot of people speculated, or either that they got trolled by a lot of the main characters, because a lot of them, like Kyle, are supposedly involved in it. With COVID and everything going on, I don't know if things are on hold. It's hard to see any specific news about it because those things are kept super hush hush. But I think if and were that to happen, who knows how much of Twin Peaks we'll get? Because I think one of the things we're going to talk about here at the end is okay, how did the season 3 finish? What do we think of it by itself? Where does it fit in with season 1, 2 in the movie? And if there's a season 4, what would we want to see? Because I think we're bringing in all this viewings in with our own idea of what we should and shouldn't get. The reality is this is what they've chosen after 25 years to give us. And it's kind of like Stranger Things. It came out recently that season 5 is going to be their last. I think season 4 is going to start, and it's been, 2 years since the last season? I don't even remember. But the lightning they had in a bottle of that, despite it getting watered down and the kids getting older, it still had a lot of popularity. But people are crying because, they're going to have to wait like a year or so to get like the final stuff. And I'm going, well, you know what? Everybody remembers Twin Peaks on a lot less episodes, and they had to go 25 years for this. So, we'll see which one's a bit of a stronger thing. And it's certainly no question. Because again, without Twin Peaks, you're not having Lost, you're not having Stranger Things, you're not having a lot of these kinds of things too. So I strongly suspect that at the end here that we don't know, we have not watched it. It's our first time that we're going to get some, for lack of a better term, setups, aka unresolved plot lines, and I'm just not sure who with yet. So I'm excited, like you. Obviously, want to thank everybody for listening too. We've had a lot of feedback on these episodes. I'm glad to see that, and we've got a very special day coming up here soon. By the time we drop this episode, and that'll be Twin Peaks dates, almost a year to the date that we started reviewing this, which I think is kind of neat. And here we are getting ready to finish it. It's pretty awesome that we're getting a chance to do this on YouTube. And who knows what will happen in the future should this translate into a podcast or grow a little bit bigger. But the Twin Peaks community that listens to this, thanks. It's very strong. It's certainly one of the most enlightened audience groups that I've seen there too. So for Professor Pixel, me, your host Rob, and everybody involved here in Extreme Moose Show, I'd like to say thanks for listening. Have a good night, and as always, stay extreme.